Okay, what is it? 6:31 p.m. Chicago time, and I think this is broadcasting okay. It's always a bit nerve-wracking doing these Google Hangouts kind of live to YouTube because I'm sitting here in my dressing gown and I only want to show you my charts, and all of a sudden, video screen sharing becomes embarrassing instead of useful. So we had a pretty important day today. There's a whole bunch of turning points lining up on charts, and I wanted to go through those and just show you what I'm looking at on my charts tonight. Yesterday, which was Tuesday, we had a really important day. It was a little doji pattern. I said the weekend's video that we were lining up for, I think maybe it was Monday's video, we were lining up for a pullback to end of trend sequence where we'd have a little bit of strength kind of come in. But what you can see here on, so this is Wednesday's activity. On Tuesday's activity here, we had a beautiful little doji pattern. Doji patterns, I mean, I'm not a big fan of Japanese candlestick patterns in general, but the doji pattern is actually quite interesting. Usually what you get is the open and close are very similar, and then you get little legs above and below the open and close, which are of a similar length. And this one was a nice little one. I mean, the range was fairly small. It wasn't micro small, but it was fairly small. Open and close was similar, and we had pretty decent volume, about 1.9 million contracts traded yesterday. So that was a really important day. Doji patterns mean that the market is just having a little think. You'll find them kind of midway through trends. You'll find them at reversal and turning points. And so the market was just having a little bit of a think. It knows in the background it's got this big kind of sell-off activity kind of back here as a little bit of a shadow that we're pointing to. And we know that the cyclical turning point was coming up. And with today's activity, we kind of blasted to the upside through the highs of that yesterday's bar, and it formed our pullback to end of trend pattern. So it's really nice, but you should have been watching for that yesterday, because that was, we knew the turning point was happening, and that was an important kind of signal that things might change. So that was kind of the lineup for today's kind of strength and kind of blasting up. And now that pullback to end of trend sequence has gone off on all of our daily indices timeframes. So we got, here's the Dow, here's the Russell, here's the NASDAQ, and here's the S&P 500. And you can see on all of these, we've got pullback, end of trend, pullback, end of trend, end of trend, end of trend kind of gone off with some nice blue professional bars down here at the lows. So that's signaling that the professionals are active. As I said, that was fairly decent volume that we had into those kind of 2 days sell-off. And some of these patterns, we've also got some nice little bullish divergence kind of come in. This one was close to the zero line on the Russell, and so we're waiting for something deeper. We haven't got confirmation yet, but that's looking like a flush pattern. Flush patterns, flushing out the last of the sellers, not as extreme selling as we get with the exhaustion pattern, but pretty deep, and that better momentum just takes a day, maybe 2 days to kind of show confirmation on these. So we'll get that hopefully in the next day or so. So it's an important turning point. Now, I've been saying that I don't think the downside move is all over, because we've kind of got these we have broken down at kind of higher time frames, significant supports on those higher time frames. But those have to be tested out with pullback to end of trend, and what we could have is quite a little bit of strength coming into that next kind of test down. So don't be surprised if this looks like the bottom might be in. There's another downswing, I think, to come to test this in properly. But for the time being, this looks pretty important, and it's important because I see it kind of coming out on a whole bunch of other charts, and so I want to roll through those. But before doing that, today's trade setup was really very nice, very pretty, and we had a nice little trade after Tuesday's close and before Wednesday's open, which was kind of a runaway move from the Asian markets all the way into the European markets, and then followed through with the US markets. And it's set up from this kind of exhaustion pattern and turning point, and I want to just roll you through those charts. Now, I know that I am teasing you a little bit with these multiple time frame charts. I'm still a week or two away from releasing these just because the coding guys that I've got doing kind of the security on these and the NinjaTrader script side have other projects kind of going on, and they're also having a little bit of trouble kind of getting everything lined up. So I apologize for teasing you with these charts. I didn't mean to do it for so long, but you can see the multiple time frame stuff kind of coming out. So this is the 4,500 tip bar chart, which is the highest time frame tip bar chart I look at. It's very similar to the 45-minute chart. And what I say is you can see the pullback to end of trends rippling through from the lowest time frames to the highest time frame. So you can see on this left shoulder here, we've got a nice little pullback to end of trend, go off on the lowest time frame, the 4,500 time frame. Gives you a little bit of a signal there. That's just a little dot. And then it ripples through to the next time frame. So you can see pullback to end of trend with slightly more emphasized kind of support and resistance lines here. And that's the second time frame. And then we've got our exhaustion patterns, first bullish divergence flush. We have a little bit of strength, but remember, we're still sitting underneath this important support. So we've got to get that kind of worked out. And so we go for a final little resistance to support move here on this 4,500 tip bar chart. And it didn't show pullback to end of trend, but it's very similar to a pullback to end of trend pattern kind of going on there with flush, flush, flush. So this all happened. Let me just show you. So that was the overnight. That was the close on Tuesday. And this was kind of the breakaway move that we had here. So we had all of these patterns. All the price patterns have gone off, showing this we're finding support down here with our end of trends. We couldn't get through this 1870 level here. We've had our exhaustion patterns. We had flush patterns kind of going on. Yeah, this is a little bit of a spike down and weakness that goes on here. But as soon as we break above these resistance lines, you can see we break 1 and then 2 time frames kind of very close together here. That's what I like to see with these patterns kind of going off. That's a confirmed break. And down at the bottom, we can see down here, we've got all these blue professional bars kind of coming in at those lows. So that's what that move, that's the strength that we had today. Came into some resistance patterns here. We had a little bit of a weakness. It got caught by exhaustion sell and bullish divergence. We break again with the latter part of today's activity into those highs. We have not seen exhaustion buy on the upside, and we're going to break probably through this resistance line here on the 4,500 tip bar chart. So I'd expect this thing to kind of motor on and give us a nice kind of trending move on the upside now. So all of that on these higher time frame charts look kind of really nice, and you can see it nicely on the 13,500 tip bar charts. This is today's activity, Wednesday, Tuesday, Monday. Monday's sell off into exhaustion sell. We put in pullback to end of trend. This is the doji day when we're just batting backwards and forwards, fairly decent range, but it was, we're testing supports at this point, open and close, very similar. And look at all those blue professional bars kind of coming in at the end of the day, testing down into that end of trend signal there, and then we break up to the upside. This weakness that we had kind of midday, again, gives us exhaustion, sell, bullish divergence, blue professional down bar. The support just about holds. We bounce back through it, bang, get up to the end of trend here. And so now we're going to break above this resistance. Maybe we'll go through a little bit of consolidation first. We'll break up above this resistance and get us into an exhaustion pattern on the upside. So on the 13,500, this thing's still got to show some legs. We've still got to get that blow-off activity until it kind of reverses and kind of goes around. So that's kind of the bigger picture, what was going on. I actually, and I don't normally do this, I actually put out a Google Plus post, which also gets tweeted on my Twitter feed, just talking about the importance of breaking up through the 1877 level. So a couple of people saw that. I got a couple of people following in on that trade, which was good for actually 20 plus points, but I took out 10 on the upside. And if you know my trading, that's a big trade for me, and it happened fairly quickly, so I was quite happy with that. This is the setup for it. So this is the 500 tip bar chart. This was the end of the activity on the Tuesday going on here. And you can see we had all those pullback to end of trends going off here. And we start to break with some red bars here, with some real strength to the market. A little bit of weakness kind of going on, but in the background, we put in our exhaustion patterns and flush patterns and so on. So this was the setup, and this is why 1877 was an absolutely key level. You can see here it was resistance on the highest time frame on this chart. It was also we had a triple. We had resistance on the intermediate and the lowest time frame, all coming together. And when they broke into this uptrend, it was a beauty. It kind of ran and ran and ran. So I got out actually before this pullback to end of trend sequence here for 10 on this thing, but it kept on going to pull back to end of trend on the second, the intermediate time frame, and then pull back to end of trend on the highest time frame up here before all of those exhaustion patterns kind of came in. Exhaustion, bearish divergence, and then you can see all of those end patterns showing up for 1903 or 5 or whatever the high was kind of up here. So it was really good for a breakaway move. A lot of that, unfortunately, was happening kind of it was after hours and kind of pre-open. That was the good strength in that move came during the Asian session, the European session, but it was a beautiful kind of little setup. So I've had a couple of questions on the Google Plus page, just saying, what was the setup? Can you walk us through? And that was it. So we have got our pullback to end of trend kind of gone off, having had in the shadow of this kind of exhaustion cell kind of going on here. We've got a little bit of strength to go before the next kind of down leg. And all of a sudden, a lot of charts are kind of starting to line up together. So I'm just going to show you some of the Forex charts, a couple of the Forex charts, and also crude oil, because I think there's something kind of happening here. So money flowing around the world potentially could be coming back into the US markets, particularly the US equity markets. I've been really bullish on the dollar index for a long time now, and it worked out very nicely last year. So this is the daily chart of the Dixie, the dollar index here, and you can see this huge kind of runaway move. Having bottomed kind of down here, we broke into this beautiful uptrend. It's been going and going and going. And it got in trouble after, well, it couldn't get through kind of 102 here, because this is the rippling through of these time frames. Pull back to end of trend on the lowest time frame, pull back to end of trend on the intermediate time frame, and then it found resistance on the highest time frame here. And that's why it just backed off a little bit from there. But we've not gone anywhere kind of special on the way down here. This was a big spiky blue professional down bar day here into those supports, and then you can see we've got this double support kind of come up on the dollar index here, and we're sitting underneath resistance at this point, and the resistance there is what is 96.5, something like that. So what I'd expect is this to be broken to the upside and take us into another trending move. I don't think we're done on the dollar index. I know we've had an exhaustion buy kind of pattern here on this left shoulder, and we've had a bearish divergence right on the zero line there. Because it's gone zero line, we'll probably go flush kind of after here, and what I'm looking at is for a break in the dollar index kind of above there that will take us into another leg on the upside. So that's all kind of happening at the moment, and I think that's important. It's also showing up, that kind of strength in dollar index is showing up as potential weakness on the euro and the pound. Less so on the commodity indices. It's just my wife's phone going off. So less so in the commodity indices on the Aussie dollar and the Canadian dollar, but there's some kind of split happening between the commodity charts, the commodity forex and charts, and the European kind of versus the US charts and the Japanese. Sometimes they're kind of moving all together. Sometimes they start splitting up and being viewed, moving in separate kind of trends, and I think that's what we're going to see at the moment. So dollar index expecting strength kind of going on there, and the European euro currency is, we're sitting on a critical support level here, just at 111. So you can see that we had the sell-off in the European currency, bang, was huge, into all of these exhaustion patterns, bullish divergence flush going on here. Same thing, with the rippling through of the time frames. So pull back to end of trend on the lowest time frame, then pull back to end of trend on the intermediate time frame. I'm looking at these the solidness of these bars here. It's like the little light bars going on there, lines going on, and then kind of intermediate time frame bars going on there. And we've still got to put in pullback to end of trend on the highest time frame with a really kind of solid bars going on here. So we've had a little bit of a spike, just like the dollar index. It was a spike up with blue professional bars up here to kind of 116, and we've had bearish divergence kind of come in here. Sorry, I should have turned this particular indicator off. That's too much information for you on this chart. That's the multi-time frame better sign we're kind of going on here. But we've had exhaustion buy and bearish divergence come in, blue professional spike up bar there, and we're sitting right at support here at 111 on the euro. So that could potentially break into another kind of testing down. We got to 105 kind of last time, the move down. I was thinking we might go to parity, but this next leg down, maybe we'll see parity on the way down on the euro. So look for weakness in the euro if it breaks through 111, kind of on the way down there. Pound, similar pattern to the pound. Now the pound, and the reason why I was kind of bullish on the pound over the last several months, because we had a whole confluence of end of trend patterns and support patterns kind of coming in. So you can see the pullback level on the lowest time frame here, pullback to end of trend, then synced up almost exactly with pullback to end of trend on the intermediate time frame, which was happening around cyclical support on the highest time frame there. So that level at 148, 147 was really important, and that's why we had this strength here. But we've run out of juice, and we've not really been able to break much above these resistance lines. So on the lowest time frame, you can see resistance come in, resistance. This one got broken a little, but held by the resistance on the intermediate time frame. And this last one, if we're in a true uptrend, all these resistance lines would get broken strongly to the upside, and we continue up. So we're bouncing off those resistance lines, and now we're breaking them on the downside. So we've got one break on the intermediate time frame happening here. Support, I think, is coming in. We've also got support on the lowest time frame, and that's going to kind of break over the next couple of days, I'd imagine. So 151, 150 is a psychologically really important level on the British pound versus dollar index, and the strength that we've had here could see us kind of roll into another kind of downtrend on the pound. In terms of exhaustion patterns and so on, there were decent readings down here with flush and so on, but wasn't as extreme as the exhaustion cell pattern that we had that set off for this uptrend the last time around a couple of years ago. So the pound's sitting on support here. The euro's sitting on support. We got the dollar index sitting under resistance, and so during the next week, I think we're going to be looking at some really interesting moves as these things kind of get going. Resuming trends. We've just been in consolidation for actually quite a while. What is that? Almost 6 months probably of consolidation of the dollar index, and so I'm seeing a potential resumption of those trends to the upside on dollar index and to the downside on euro and pound. But again, wait and see. Let's see if those kind of levels get broken over the next couple of days, and they could bring in some more volume and some more kind of momentum to kind of push those trends in those directions. And then lastly, crude oil today put in a little pullback to end of trend sequence here. You can see it's on this lowest kind of time frame. Everything was lining up for a potential reversal or change in trend here at $50, 52 kind of down here. You can see we had those rippling through the time frames, pull back to end of trend on the low time frame and the intermediate time frame, and then we had a cyclical support, kind of an important level there at 51.73 kind of going on. We'd had our exhaustion cell, bullish divergence and flush patterns kind of going on. You can see that there with the patterns, but until we start to break resistance levels on the upside, we don't have an uptrend in place. And so you can see all the bars are all white on the way down because we've not broken any resistance levels on the upside. Now we put in pullback to end of trend under this really important blue professional bars. Was this, I've said the other day on this video, I'd expect the blue professional bars to kind of come in at the lows here, and they didn't. They bought this move up. It's almost like kind of a short covering rally type stuff, desperately trying to hold, show the strength in there. Getting through the highs of this blue professional bar, this little sequence, will be really important going forward. So is this pullback to end of trend just holding at the time being? You can see we've got little bullish divergence patterns here, not a lot of appetite to sell this thing down. And if we start breaking up through the highs of these, and what are we talking about? 49.63. So breaking up through kind of 50s on the upside would show that there is strength there, and we're kind of potentially found a low in crude for I don't know how long, but that's an important kind of turning point. So I'm less convinced. It needs some time to play out. We need to break through that 50. We need to put in a resistance pattern and then break through that and kind of get a confirmation to the upside. As I say, with the trending kind of bars here, they're all showing everything's on the way down here. We've got no red bars kind of going off, showing that we've got a potential uptrend break happening at the moment, but that little pullback to end of trend move went off there, and it's within the shadow of that little sequence of maybe short covering or people kind of trying to force the market up. The news out of Saudi is really interesting at the moment. If you're kind of covering some of the zero hedge, or the I don't think Business Insider is kind of covering it, but certain zero hedge is covering some of the inner workings of what's happening within the House of Saud going on there. It's just interesting that kind of turning point kind of came out. Maybe enough pain has been had on the downside by the Saudis, and they're saying, no, enough's enough. We need to get this thing back to something that's more reasonable. The 40s is not reasonable. Maybe the 70s is more reasonable. Who knows? So that's what I'm looking at on my charts today. We had a nice little kind of turning point, expecting it to run for a few days in equities until the next cyclical kind of turning point starts to show up, because I think we're going to test down at some point again, but for the time being we've got some strength. I do hope you were checking your charts and saw these kind of turning points happening and had a good took some good long trades today. I think we had some nice kind of setups, so it's all kind of good stuff. So 6:52 p.m., so about 22 minutes on this Google Hangout. Let's hope it was all kind of good. I tried one of these a couple of months ago and was talking to myself instead of kind of broadcasting, and had to do it all again. But hopefully this says that I'm broadcasting. It's all kind of going good. So hope your trading is going well.